bring in Newt Gingrich. He's a Fox News contributor, former Speaker of the House. He joins us from Rome, actually. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you can understand how here in the United States right now, there's a lot of frustration. A lot of people want to get back to work. But there are a lot of these stay-at-home orders for a variety of reasons so that the curve goes down and people can eventually go back to work and all of the social distancing eventually goes away. But can you understand the frustration for the people who are in Montana versus the people who might be here in New Jersey? Because you're in a hot spot. You're in Rome.
Sure. Look, the virus got to be so bad in Italy that they had no choice except to close virtually everything. And it's been pretty strict now for about 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah.
If you leave your house, you can't go more than 200 meters, even to walk your dog or whatever. You can't be in groups of larger than 2. You can be fined $3,200 if the police find you on the street without an appropriate reason. They have gas stations open, pharmacies, grocery stores. That's it now. For 17 straight days, they've had a steady, slow decline in the number of people going into intensive care units. And there's beginning to be some optimism that we are very, very close to reaching a plateau and starting downward. I think they are beginning to inch towards opening a few things here. It tells you a lot about Italy. One of the first things they're going to reopen are stores that fix coffee machines, because without espresso and other Italian coffees, how can one truly live? So I thought that was a perfectly Italian solution. But they're being very careful, very slow. And I would say there are 2 things going on. First of all, the United States is a gigantic country. It's bigger than all of Europe. And so what's right for Montana or Texas, or what's right for West Texas versus Houston, are different things. And I think the president's very wise to decentralize, delegate, and give the governors an assignment. Second, I think some of the governors have shown their ideological bias, so that one governor, for example, said it was okay for Planned Parenthood to stay open for abortions, but it wasn't okay for the churches to have services. Well, that's clearly just an ideological abuse of the emergency. And I think that part of what has people with their teeth on edge, because they're watching politicians abuse their power. So I think the president's right. Go back to work slowly, carefully, learn lessons. I mean, if South Dakota and North Dakota, for example, working with Sanford Health and others, decides that they're going to gradually open up, let's learn from what works and what doesn't work. And every state should study every other state as they go through this process. And in a couple of months, I think we'll be dramatically further down the road.
I know that you address many of these issues in your op-ed on foxnews.com. The headline is "Coronavirus Crisis Makes Some Leaders Believe That They Have Godlike Decision-Making Capacity." Will you explain that? Which leaders are you talking about?
Well, one is the governor of Michigan, who issued this truly absurd executive order suggesting, for example, that you couldn't buy a child's seat, you couldn't buy seeds. So if you went to Walmart or you went to Home Depot, the area that sold seeds to plant in your backyard had a sign up that said it's illegal to buy these right now. Well, I mean, normal people thought, I mean, what is that all about? And if you look at the list, what you sort of get is that some, intern must have written it up because it makes so little sense. And I think that's an example. You had a mayor in Illinois who declared that she had the right to decide who could get food and who couldn't get food. I mean, the kind of things, Lord Acton warned us that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you look around the country, one of the major responsibilities right after defeating the virus and restarting the economy, the third big effort is going to be take power back from the politicians, because you cannot allow them to decide that they're little petty gods who get to decide life and death for all the rest of us.
Yeah, that Democratic governor might be doing her work, might be doing her best to get Donald Trump Michigan again. We'll have to see. I saw the New York Times do a story on her and didn't even bring up the 52 executive orders, like don't buy paint, you can't use a motorboat, but you can use a kayak. They didn't even put that in the story, or that 4 sheriffs said we're not going to enforce this. Meanwhile, your idol, Nancy Pelosi, who has the job that you used to have, weighed in on what kind of job Donald Trump's doing, and to the surprise of nobody, not very good, according to her. Listen.
Don't you believe Dr. Fauci?
Yeah, well, he said if this were to be done properly, well, it hasn't been done. On March 4th, we passed our first bill, bipartisan, testing. It's over 6 weeks since then, and it hasn't been done. We're way late on it, and that is the failure. The president gets an F, a failure on the testing. But Dr. Fauci's right. If it is done properly, it hasn't been. And that, I think, when he puts it in the if it is done, is an admission that it hasn't been done.
She sat there by her multi-million-dollar refrigerators and made those comments. Right. Your response?
Well, I wrote my newsletter Friday on the job-killing, ice cream-eating Democrats, because I thought the whole notion of Nancy Pelosi holding up aid to small business while she stood in front of her two very expensive refrigerators and talked about how she loves to have her $11.75 a pint ice cream that it comforts her. It was the most tone-deaf thing I've ever seen a Speaker of the House do. And I started with Tip O'Neill and Jim Wright and Tom Foley. And, of course, I worked with Denny Hastert and John Boehner and Paul Ryan. This was just plain goofy. I mean, even by San Francisco standards, it was goofy. The fact is the president's worked very closely with Dr. Fauci, and Dr. Fauci says so every time he's asked by the press. He and Dr. Birx both have very professional standards. They've been advising the president, but in the end, look, the reason you have a president is there are some decisions larger than experts, and it's the job of the president to weigh everything and then try to make the best possible decision. I would say overall, you look at our fatality rate and you look at Europe, and you can feel pretty good about what the Trump administration has done.
Newt, I'm sure you saw some of the video of the various protests around the country regarding the stay-at-home orders. One of the big ones was in Denver, Colorado yesterday, and the Denver Post talked to a fellow by the name of Jim Finnemore, and he said that he thinks that Democrats are using the coronavirus as a political tool, he said, to crash the economy and hurt the president so that he loses. You don't think there are politics like that involved in these calculations, do you?
To be honest, I don't think that Schumer and Pelosi mind, or that Biden minds, if the economy doesn't quite recover rapidly. I mean, they're faced with a nightmare. If the president finishes handling the coronavirus as well as I think he will, and he then pivots and uses all of his ability to create a strong economy, and by September and October, you can tell that we're coming back. The election will be over and Trump will get reelected. Well, you know, if you're Pelosi and Schumer, you'd sort of like to have that comeback, say, next January, but not this September. And I'm not saying that they sit down in a coldly calculated way, but I don't think that they have at any point placed putting America back to work ahead of partisan politics. And that's why for a week now, they have screwed up the small business loans, which clearly hurts because small business creates the largest number of new jobs in America. And you have a lot of small businesses saying, look, I've got about a week to go if I can't get financing. And they just sat on it. Well, you tell me why that is not, frankly, a remarkably destructive thing for them to be doing.
Mr. Speaker, why did they do that? Why are they making this political? Why did the Democrats not pass the proposal, the last proposal? I mean, is it because they don't want the president to have a win? Don't they need to put the American people ahead of anything else?
Well, look, I think that they are engaged in a game of chicken. And they've done this now several times. And their hope is that at some point that the president or Secretary Mnuchin or somebody will flinch and give them what they want. And I think that overall, and I give Senator Mitch McConnell a great deal of credit for this. When he passed the very large $2.2 trillion aid package by 96-0, he took all the wind out of Pelosi's sails. It was impossible for her at that point to block anything. But what they're doing is serious. This is not a game. They want to say, and I say this having been a speaker who negotiated with a Democratic president, you know, you start out and you say, how far can I push him? And of course, with Trump, not very far. And I think on these issues, they're so far out of sync with the country that it's very destructive for them to play these games. But I think that they have no choice. They're left will not tolerate them cooperating with Donald Trump.
Gotcha. All right, the other thing I want to bring you to, and before we get to what Jay Johnson just told us, as he's Democratic, he was former Secretary of Homeland Security, just from your perspective, you had a lot of European countries about to get in bed with China with this Belt and Road program and getting the 5G from Huawei. After the reality of what they've done in destroying 180 nations' economy and killing so many from the irresponsible behavior when it came to this virus, do you believe the Italians are rethinking that alliance? And do you believe, but beyond Germany, who's already registered their disdain, do you believe other countries are too?
Yes, I think this has been a stunningly eye-opening experience. I have a paper that'll come out this week pointing out, based really on the Hudson Institute's remarkable timeline. They produced a timeline all the way back to November of last year, and it's devastating. The University of Southampton estimates that if the Chinese had been honest, 95% of the people who have died would still be alive. Now, that is,
wow.
Think about that, over 160,000 dead, and according to the University of Southampton, 95% of those people died because the Chinese Communist dictatorship deliberately lied and got its puppet at the World Health Organization to deliberately lie. And I think, frankly, that we should take some significant steps. One which would affect Italy, which Hugh Hewitt wrote about and I thought was brilliant, is simply move the Winter Olympics in 2022 from China back to Turin, Italy, which hosted it, I think, in 2002, and allow Turin, at the very center of the area that had been savaged by the Chinese, allow Turin to host the Olympics next year. That would be the kind of gesture that would really begin to communicate that the world's fed up with the way the dictatorship operates. And there's no question the Chinese dictatorship has cost the world, by the time it's done, they'll have cost the world several 100,000 lives and many, many
wow.
trillions of dollars of economic activity. And something has to be done to hold the dictatorship and Xi Jinping and his entire group accountable for the damage they've done to the human race worldwide.
Well, let's see what they figure out. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for joining us from
Good to be with
Rome,
you.
Italy.
Thank you.
Stay safe. You bet.